This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the European Union threatens economic sanctions against Israel. Plus, the U.S. hails the Geneva Accords as a breakthrough. But this man says the agreement leaves an open door for Iran to acquire nuclear weapons. And 13 years of living and reporting in the Holy Land. I'll share some of the biggest stories and personal reflections from my time here in Jerusalem. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell, coming to you from a cold and snowy Jerusalem. It's the third year in a row that Jerusalem has had a substantial snowfall. We'll show you more about the snow a little later in the program. But first, in just a few weeks, the European Parliament could punish a Middle Eastern country with economic sanctions. And it's not Iran. The EU target is Israel. Here's our report from the EU headquarters in Brussels, Belgium. New economic guidelines would prohibit money from the EU to Israeli communities beyond what's called the Green Line, also known as the West Bank. In order to receive funding, private Israeli entities must prove they have no ties to the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and East Jerusalem. The economic impact could run into the millions. Some believe the move is part of a growing anti-Semitism moving across Europe. Those new EU guidelines are being established here in Brussels, Belgium, at the European Parliament. They represent a major economic challenge to Israel and could predetermine the borders of a future Palestinian state.
And these guidelines that basically restrict any type of cooperation, financial cooperation between Europe and these disputed territories. And it's more complicated than you would think, because even if you would have one particular university wanting to engage in a multi-million program with the EU, if you happen to have one professor living, say, in East Jerusalem, it would be impossible with these new guidelines.
Andrew Tucker of Christians for Israel International says the guidelines put Europe in the position of creating a Jew-free state.
But I think the thing that concerns us most is the signal that it's giving. And we're concerned that Europe is on a slippery slope towards enforcing the creation of a Palestinian state, and it will be a Palestinian state where Jews will not be welcome.
Tucker and others feel this slippery slope would pressure Israel to create a future Palestinian state based on the so-called 1967 borders, divide Jerusalem, and make it illegal for Jews to live there.
There's nothing in the guidelines to say that Jews are not allowed to live in a new Palestinian state. But we would see it as part of a broader project whereby Europe is saying all Israeli settlements are illegal, which means any Jew living in so-called Eastern Jerusalem, and you know better than I do, you know this is the heart of Jewish Jerusalem, Judea and Samaria, is illegal. Once you buy into that, then it's a question of implementing administrative steps to make it a reality, and the guidelines is just one example.
Israel and the EU did sign an economic agreement recently called Horizon 2020, but the financial restrictions remain in place for the disputed territories. Israel's representative to the EU feels that hurts both Israelis and Palestinians.
At the end of the day, if we are talking about the territories behind the 67 borders, it means also that settlements, but also Palestinians living around these settlements are not going to benefit from these grants.
It reminds Sandel of the anti-Semitism spawned in Europe during the 1930s.
For me, this is anti-Semitism 2.0. It's more sophisticated, but it's very effective in terms of demonizing Jews, demonizing the Jewish state, and making life very difficult for those in particular who would want to live in these disputed territories. I know many people will be upset by hearing me stating this, but I do see similarities. Then they simply said, don't buy from Jews. Today it's boycott Israel.
Just a few weeks ago, 6 world powers and Iran signed an accord in Geneva about Iran's nuclear program. But just a few minutes after the signing, the two parties disagreed on what was said. Some Israeli experts warn that the differences could allow Iran to get a nuclear device. And one of those experts is Dori Gold, Israel's former ambassador to the UN. We sat down in his office and he shared his concerns. Ambassador, what are the differences in expectations between the P5+1 and Iran after the Geneva Agreement?
If we just take one or two fields, for example, Wendy Sherman, Undersecretary of State for Political Affairs, and she's really the head negotiator for the United States on the Iran file, appropriately said that she envisions that down the road, when they get to a permanent agreement, that Iran's going to have to dismantle part of its nuclear facilities. My team started translating statements made by President Hassan Rouhani, who said, dismantling our nuclear facilities, that's a red line. So there's a huge gap that's coming down the road. You know, the Iranians don't even want to call this a treaty. They try to find language to describe the Geneva document so they won't have an international legal commitment. And Mohammad Zarif, the foreign minister, said so explicitly. So there is a very different way the U.S. and Iran are treating this agreement.
And what are the implications for Iran's nuclear program? And does this get Iran closer to a nuclear device if they want so?
Well, one of the big issues is sanctions, because the real leverage that the West has against Iran are those economic sanctions that were really hurting Iran, you know, up until this agreement was reached. We are assured by the administration that the overall infrastructure, architecture as they call it, of the sanctions is still intact. So they may be getting some money from frozen accounts, a few $1 billion, but the overall architecture of the sanctions is intact. What does Rouhani, the president of Iran, say in Farsi, in Persian language? He says the exact opposite. He says, no, we're going to fracture the architecture of sanctions, using the American term. And it's just beginning now. So what the Iranians want to do is undermine the sanctions as much as possible. So when they go into future negotiations with the U.S. and the P5+1 in general, there will be no leverage on the American side to extract concessions from Iran.
How does Iran see itself, and what is its national security doctrine?
Years ago, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei gave an interview in a Iranian newspaper called Risalat. The year was 1991, and he was asked what the national security doctrine of Iran is. Is it the protection of Iran, or is it expansion? He said, no, the national security doctrine is expansion. And those of us who sit in the Middle East and see what Iran is doing on the ground, we see Iranian weapons boats certainly coming to the Mediterranean to give weapons to Hamas or to Hezbollah. But they're also coming to Yemen, where they're supporting the Houthi rebellion against the Yemeni government. They're involved in Bahrain, where there's a branch of Hezbollah. They're involved in the eastern province of Saudi Arabia, where there is a substantial Shia population. And finally, in Syria. Now, everyone's aware of the brutality of the regime of Bashar al-Assad. But what few people know is that the bloodbath in Syria is being both directed and manned by Iranian soldiers coming from the Quds Force, the overseas units of the Revolutionary Guards. Now, if you want to get a stable relationship between Iran and the West, Iran's got to cut out this behavior. You can't negotiate with Iran and get a stable outcome as long as Iran believes the Middle East belongs to Tehran.
And you also, near the end of your presentation, made what you said was a politically incorrect statement. Does Iran have a right to enrich uranium?
The answer to that is no. The fact of the matter is, if you study the 1968 Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which the Iranians signed, it doesn't say anything about a right to enrich. This is an Iranian interpretation of the agreement, of the treaty, and the Iranians are trying to push the West into granting a legal right which they don't have.
Great. Thank you, Ambassador. The deal is also causing international concern, and some traditional U.S. allies question whether the U.S. is losing influence in the Middle East, and the consequences are already rippling throughout the region. After Geneva, many Middle East experts see a stronger Iran, a weaker America, and a region teetering on the brink.
So we in the Middle East, we in Israel, and as I see in the Arab press, because this is my business, to follow Arab press, they are confused and they don't believe anymore in American influence in the region.
For decades, American influence acted like a rudder steering events in the Middle East. Now, many Mideast experts, like former Israeli ambassador to Egypt, Zvi Mazel, believe the region is losing its way.
The Middle East lost its compass. You see, in the old times there used to be the Soviet Union and the United States, but now everyone goes his own direction.
The perception is that America will not be here around for long, and Iran is the coming superpower.
A major change in U.S. Mideast policy is the attempt to turn Iran from an adversary to a friend.
It's not completely friend yet, but I'm saying it's on the way too. I believe this is what President Obama sees, that there will be a dialogue with Iran and there will be relations with America, and Iran will become a good boy, a good student. We don't believe it.
The diplomatic courtship with Iran and the perception of waning U.S. influence have led to shifting and unprecedented alliances in the region. Since many Mideast nations see Iran as an existential threat, the Gulf states are considering uniting for their own self-defense. And both Egypt and Saudi Arabia have reached out to find another ally besides the United States.
There is now a dialogue between Saudi Arabia and Russia. It doesn't happen every day.
Can you believe it? Saudi Arabia. Prince Bandar went twice to Moscow lately.
Pincus, Mazel, and others now see the Middle East with America retreating and Russia advancing.
Putin is really a very happy man. Everywhere where America is going away, he's coming in immediately.
Mazel warns Russia's comeback in the Middle East is just one consequence of U.S. Mideast policy. He also warns if Iran does get a nuclear bomb, it would be the beginning of a Mideast nuclear arms race. A look back at more than a decade of life and work in Israel. We'll talk about some of the biggest stories of the last 13 years and the future of the Jewish state.
Hi, my name is Breda. I'm just your typical 9-year-old. I love singing, dancing, reading, discovering the simple truth. My grandpa says you're never too young or old to learn the value of a dollar. He taught me the true value of this paper dollar. You see this little gold coin? It says $1 on it. But guess what? That was a long time ago. Today, this gold dollar is worth over 100 paper dollars. This paper dollar is now only worth 1 penny compared to America's former money, the gold dollar. My grandpa says the only money worth saving today is real money, gold or silver coins. He's pretty smart. How our paper dollars lost their value, he says. It's all explained in a new book, The Great Debasement. It's easy and fun to read. If you call the number on the screen, I will send you a copy totally free. Next time, I'll explain the simple truth about money.
Millions of Americans with an ostomy live their lives to the fullest every day. And over the last 10 years, thousands have chosen Liberator Medical as their caring and reliable resource for ostomy supplies. Liberator Medical is a nationally accredited Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance provider, so we can handle all your Medicare, Medicaid, and insurance paperwork and billing. And Liberator Medical has been chosen as a preferred supplier by all the leading ostomy manufacturers, including Coloplast, Hollister, Convatec, and Generics. We supply all these leading ostomy brands so you can always get the ostomy supplies and accessories you want and trust. And all of our ostomy care specialists are product certified by the manufacturers. Shipping is free and discreetly delivered right to your door. Unhappy with your present ostomy supplier? Call Liberator Medical and ask about our free ostomy sampling program. We also offer catheters and urological supplies.
Call 1-800-513-3076. That's 1-800-513-3076.
For the past 13 years, I've been in the CBN News Bureau here in Jerusalem, reporting on the stories from Israel and around the Middle East. Now I've written about many of those experiences in a new book called Dateline Jerusalem, an eyewitness account of prophecies unfolding in the Middle East. Recently, I sat down with CBN's Scott Ross to talk more about the book and the events unfolding in the Middle East.
Correspondent Chris Mitchell brought his family to Israel 12 years ago to establish CBN's Middle East News Bureau in Jerusalem.
Where are we?
Jerusalem,
Yeah, but
center of the world.
What is all this behind us?
All this is the Mount of Olives there in the background, the old city with the Temple Mount where the first and second temples used to be. This is the place where history's final chapter is going to be written, right here.
Wow. On my recent trip to Israel, I asked him what he's learned, why he wrote his new book, and what he sees for the future of Jerusalem. Why did you come?
Well, I felt God called us. In fact, a good friend of yours, Derek Prince, he was getting out of the British Army, and he talked to an elderly Jewish woman, asked and told her he wanted to live in Jerusalem. Well, she said to him, Derek, you don't choose Jerusalem. Jerusalem chooses you.
When he heard that story, Mitchell says he knew Jerusalem had chosen him. With his wife and 3 children, he arrived in August 2000, just 5 weeks before the second Intifada erupted, with almost daily suicide bombings and terror attacks. Now, you've been here during a time of war. How have you responded to that on a daily basis?
We know God called us, and the scriptures in Psalm 91, that he that dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And whether it's the second Intifada in 2000 to 2004, the Second Lebanon War in 2006, or the threat of Iran nuclear war, that's the scripture that keeps us.
Mitchell has been on the scene of wars and rumors of wars.
Right now, we're just running back into the bomb shelter.
Terror attacks and peace talks, revolution and refugees.
And many of these Syrian refugees here are experiencing the love of Christians.
He's also covered stories on the brighter side, from groundbreaking archaeological discoveries.
They also discovered a pottery shard with the name Elisha on it,
to Israel's life-saving heart surgery on children from enemy countries. But the stories that stand out the most, he says, are the ones that relate to the Bible. Out of all the stories you've covered in 12 years of reporting, are there any particular stories that stand out in your mind?
When we took a 3-day voyage from Odessa in the former Soviet Union to Haifa. And it was a 3-day voyage, but it was a 3,000-year promise in the making, when Jeremiah said that he would bring his people back here. It's like the Jews returning to the land. It's the settling on the mountains of Israel. You know, the world calls the mountains of Israel, Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. But if you look at it deeper and look at it from a biblical point of view, these are the lands that God promised to Abraham. So this is the biblical heritage that we get to walk in and report on.
For Mitchell, the news is more than individual stories. He sees a theme emerging that ties world events to the final battle for Jerusalem. What does this mean to you as a man living here with your family, doing your news reports, etc.?
You know, 2,000 years ago, it was said that all roads lead to Rome. 2,000 years later, I would feel that all roads are leading to Jerusalem. And whether it's Christians praying for the peace of Jerusalem like never before, or if it's about Jews that are coming back to this city and fulfilling a dream of 2,000 years, or if it's radical Muslims who want to see Jerusalem as the capital of a caliphate, all roads for good and evil seem to be leading back here.
On the political question, what about the dividing of Jerusalem, the Palestinian capital? How do you respond to that?
I don't think the Jews will ever give it back. I don't think they'll divide it. And despite what the Palestinians want and what the world may demand, I think that the Jews will never give back the city of Jerusalem, and this will be the final battle.
And the culmination of that world focus on Jerusalem led to his book. You've written a book, Chris, Dateline Jerusalem. This is 12 years of experience in your past and also some of the things we've been talking about here. Why'd you write the book?
There's a scripture in the Old Testament which said the sons of Issachar understood the times and they knew what Israel should do. And I hope that people reading Dateline Jerusalem could help understand the times and know what they should do.
And what should the Christian response be? Does prayer make a difference?
Prayer, it seems almost, could be the rudder of history during these days. Now, we know certain things are going to happen regardless because that's what the Word says. But I think God wants to partner with us in prayer in these last days.
As a man, how have you changed living in this land over the last 12 years? What's it done to you?
I think it's given me, hopefully, a better perspective about the times that we live in and how important it is for everyone to be prepared to meet the Lord, whether it's, tomorrow or 10 years from now. It's made me feel like it's so important to get right with God and get it right and to follow Him. Because whether you're here in Jerusalem and things are dangerous, you need Him. And whether you're somewhere in New York City or Los Angeles or St. Louis, you need Him.
Attention sleep apnea patients. Are you tired of the expense and hassle of getting your CPAP and BiPAP supplies? Are you fed up with dealing with ill-fitting, leaking, or worn-out masks and straps? Are you worried about the effects that unsanitary tubes, cushions, and filters have on your health? If you said yes to any of these questions, Allied Medical Supply Network has the solution to your problems. You could qualify to have your supplies regularly delivered right to your door at little or no cost to you. That's right, no more inconvenience, no worn-out masks and straps, no more unsanitary equipment, just restful sleep. Call Allied Medical Supply Network today to determine if you may qualify to receive your fresh, brand-name supplies at little or no cost. Don't delay. Call us now to see if you are eligible to save money on regular delivery of your CPAP and BiPAP supplies. Call 1-800-815-9947. That's 1-800-815-9947. Or go to cpapsupplyhelpline.com.
Announcing an important breakthrough in healthcare that can benefit everyone. If you or anyone you love needs affordable health insurance, regardless of a pre-existing medical condition, call Quick Insurance 123 today and get the immediate relief you deserve. Quick Insurance 123 was created to provide affordable health insurance to all uninsured Americans, with or without pre-existing conditions. This is not a discount card. This is a real insurance program that lets you choose from many affordable health plans, with access to doctors, hospitals, emergency services, and more. So call the number on your screen now and get the health coverage you need, just for calling. As a special bonus, we'll send you a free prescription savings card that could save you up to 85% on your prescriptions. That's right, you could save up to 85% on your prescriptions, just for calling. Call Quick Insurance 123 to find out how you can get affordable health insurance and receive your free prescription savings card, just for calling. Don't wait. Getting a free quote is as easy as 1, 2, 3. Call today.
A growing wave of persecution faces both Jews and Christians worldwide. One Jewish leader says the two groups must stand together in the face of increasing violence.
I will not be silent, and we will not be silent.
That's the message Ron Lauder, president of the World Jewish Congress, takes to Christians these days about Jewish support for persecuted Christians.
Silence is the biggest help to anti-Semitism or anti-Christianity. One of the things we've seen over and over again is that when you talk out and you fight back, people react.
Historians blame public apathy for helping lead to the horrors of World War II. The World Jewish Congress, founded in 1936, became the diplomatic arm for Jewish people worldwide.
We see the same recurrence we saw in the 1930s, and it's very scary. But there's also an anti-Christian feeling. We've seen it in the Middle East particularly, when churches are burned, when people are killed.
Lauder noted that some 450,000 Christians have fled Syria, and in Bethlehem, the Christian population has dropped from a high of 70% to around 15 to 20% today. He also told CBN News about two types of anti-Semitism growing in Europe today. The first masquerades as anti-Israel feeling, mainly stirred by Muslim populations in Western Europe. The second is pushed by extremists in Eastern Europe and elsewhere.
These extremes have to blame somebody for the problems, and they're blaming the Jewish people once again.
Lauder is viewed as the leader of the Jewish community worldwide. His background as a former senior Pentagon official and U.S. ambassador to Austria puts him in a unique position to speak to world leaders. In an unprecedented move, Lauder thanked thousands of Christians during September's Feast of Tabernacles celebration for their support for Israel.
Thank you for standing on the right side of history. Thank you for standing with God. And thank you for standing with us, the Jewish people. And lastly, thank you for standing here in Jerusalem, the eternal, undivided capital of the State of Israel.
David Parsons called the speech an historic moment in diaspora Jewish-Christian relations.
There aren't many prominent diaspora leaders who have done this in the way that he did, coming and openly and profusely thanking us for our support and actually saying, we want to partner with you. You've stood with us on Jerusalem. Guess what? We want to stand with you on the issue of the persecution of Christians in Muslim countries.
Every time something's done, be it to Jews or to Christians, it hurts us all. We must work together.
Jerusalem when it becomes a wintry wonderland.
Do you have an idea for an invention or a new product? Brian and Alice Jagosh, the inventors of the halftime drill driver, did. They invented a power drill attachment that lets you drill, flip, and drive in seconds. Brian and Alice licensed their invention to the company that brought you the Snuggie, and it's now selling in major retailers nationwide. Look for the Invent Help Caveman on the package. If you have an invention that you would like to try to patent and submit to companies for possible review and want free information on how InventHelp may be able to assist you, call now. InventHelp is America's largest inventor service company with sales offices in more than 60 cities nationwide. Call InventHelp today for free information. Our clients made a financial gain with their invention, but this is just their individual result. Brian and Alice's experience is not typical, as only a very small number of inventions are licensed or sold in stores.
For your free inventors information, call 1-800-559-8567. That's 1-800-559-8567.
If you had a choice between going bald and a full head of hair, which would you choose? Advances in medical science have resulted in the world's first and only permanent solution to hair loss.
Yes!
You wash it, you cut it. It's your own real, naturally growing hair. When it comes to hair restoration, no one in the world has more experience than Bosley. The results look completely natural and are affordable on nearly any budget. But the entire process can't be explained in 60 brief seconds. So to find out more about this clinically proven and permanent solution to hair loss, call now to receive your free no-obligation information kit. It'll answer all of your questions about hair loss and hair restoration. Plus, we'll also send you this $250 gift certificate just for calling. Every day you wait, you're losing more hair. So don't put it off any longer. You owe it to yourself to find out the facts. Choose hair. Choose Bosley.
Call 800-868-9957. That's 800-868-9957.
Well, as we said at the beginning of the program, this is the third year in a row that Jerusalem has had a substantial snowfall. We end this program with a look at the wintry wonderland this year in Jerusalem. That's it for this edition. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline, and enjoy the snow.